Hey guys, what's up? It's another episode of I Have Coffee and You Have Ambitions. It's been a really long time since we've done one of these, and I'm so sorry. But you know what? Lately, we've had quite a few other things come out if you haven't noticed, a lot of different Let's Plays, and since I'm kind of one of the ones that primarily edits a lot of them, you know, my time gets taken up. I also realized in the first episode I talked about how we were doing all these things, and I kind of thought about it, and I was like, you know, as far as it goes for now, let's just worry about code. Because you can get a lot of stand-in assets, and that could be something we worry about later, and that's what was dampening down the progress for me. Let me just rearrange some of my windows here, because I got people messaging me on the side, which I promise won't take up any of our time. Actually, that's just gonna do a video. Leave me alone. That's what I do. I tell them leave me alone, because they get it. So it looks like the engine actually updated too. I think last time we did this tutorial, I think it was in 0.1, and as long as the engine stays in the same second numbers, like, you notice here I have 411. One of the games I used to have was running on 411, but I've decided since then I'm not doing it. So, technically speaking, I could get rid of 411. We're going to be using 4.12.5, and like I said, the .5 is not really too important, so as long as you have 4.12, you should be able to follow along just fine. In this episode, we're mainly going to set up the actual level and set up a lot of the base class content, like your objects, actors, pawns. I'll explain what they do. So we're going to go ahead and launch 4.12.5. And once this opens up here, which, you know, give it a second, it's a little slow. Even on a solid state drive, actually. Oh, wait, is this on my solid state? I think this is on my black drive. So we're going to click New Project. We're going to go with a blank project. Okay. And what we're going to do is we're going to have starter content turned on. So if you don't have it turned on, go ahead and just click this little button here and starter content. As far as it goes here, just leave it for desktop console and leave it on maximum quality. And we got to give it a home. So you know what? I will actually make its home in the folder 4. Let's go to my Dropbox here and go to Purple Husky Media. And let's see. I'll put it inside of the actual folder. By the way, I'm very organized. As you can see, tons of freaking folders. And I'll just make a new folder here. And I will call it UE4 Shooter Tutorial. And I will actually leave it in here so I don't lose it, you know, because we're going to want to use this later. And as for the project name, you can name it whatever you like. I like to come up with the working titles, because that's what most people do, is they just come up with something to remember it by, and then once you've got a story and a whole game, you can look at it and go, wow, this looks like the game's called insert amazing game name here, because yeah. So I'm just going to call this one Shooter Thingy. That's a technical term. So let's go ahead, we'll wait for this to open. It's going to initialize here and load. I don't know why I'm reading that to you. You can clearly see it on my screen. Oh, I was like, why is it on this side? It should be on the other side. Yeah, alright. So here we have what is actually a blank project. You'll notice it's not blank. It has this little table with what I originally thought was a figurine or a person. I guess it's actually just weird icicle-looking pointy thing. But it's just your basic scene. It's blank, nothing in it. If you deleted these couple assets out, you're good. Which reminds me, as far as assets go, I'm not going to be creating any myself. However, I will be importing some that I'm using for the actual game. They were all designed by a good friend of mine, and he is very good at what he does, and he has impressed me so much with his work. Next time around, I'll probably be using that level, because we'll be working on character meshes and everything. This one's just about setting the game up. So there are a lot of different high-level classes you can use. So if we were to right-click here, and I like to be organized, so I'm going to create a new folder here. That was a new class. It looks like a folder. I'm going to name this content, which pretty basic starter, and it goes next to the starter content. And in here, we just won't worry about putting anything. We'll organize later, but let's just go through the basic things. So if we were to go to create a new blueprint class, you'll see our different classes here. Now, one of the ones you won't see, or maybe you will see if I go down here, is object. Here we go. So the object is just kind of like a base class for the rest of the Unreal Engine classes. So like it can't be added and it can't be spawned. but it does have data. So like, if you don't need to have it in the level, it's perfect for you because it doesn't have draw calls. So basically, it's kind of like almost like a global object. It won't come into the world. Okay, so if you want something with behaviors, that's where this comes in, an actor. And as it says here, an actor is an object that can be placed or spawned into the world, which is true. And it can have components like static meshes or like sprites. So basically, you would have to always spawn this in the level for it to work. And it does have draw calls. Next would be like a pawn. A pawn is an actor that can be possessed and receives input. So basically, a pawn is an actor, but it can be used by the player controller or an AI controller. So when you think about it, it's kind of like, you know, it's the pawn. It's the thing being controlled. It's a pretty obvious name. Next would be a character. So a character is a type of pawn, but it also has the ability to walk around. So basically, it has a movement component built into it. So thanks to that, it can use the navigation. Characters also will have a skeletal mesh component, I believe. So you can assign graphic representations by default. So we're actually going to create a new one of these. And we're going to name it... let's just call it main player, okay? And as you'll see, it gives you a little... kind of like a capsule, the capsule hitbox with a little character in it, like the empty character up here. Next, we'd have a player controller. So a player controller can get its inputs, and if I go into Blueprint class, I should be able to pull up player controller. See? A player controller is a very important component here, because what it's going to do is it's going to get input, like a keyboard, a mouse, a touchpad, you know, Oculus Rift, anything. And it can possess the pawn or the character. And you can also have different controllers if you have different like movements or functions you want. So like if you're controlling a car, you would use a car controller, and you'd have a different one for a person because, you know, or, you know, you would have a different one for an airplane and a car because an airplane has different controls than a car would. So these are made for everything that would be controlled by the player. So it's not literally just a single controller that translates all the different things, which is something I've noticed a lot of people like be like, oh, it's a player controller, so it's the controller for the player. No, it's a controller for the pawn and whatever pawn you're moving. So we're going to create a new one. And we will name it, I guess main player, because right now we don't have any vehicles, so main player controller. And, you know, you could use your camel case or hump case, whatever you want to call it. So next up, let me see if I can find it here. Normally you can find all these by going in here and searching. There should be AI controller. So what an AI controller is it's kind of like a player controller where it possesses a pawn or a character. But this doesn't have player input. Instead, it has AI tools and behavior trees and sensing components for telling if someone's near or where to aim. It's very, very powerful and a very useful thing, and we are going to get into this later on. So the next thing is a game instance, which we're going to be making, so I'll look this up. Game instance, right here. That little guy with the circle, right there. The game instance is... basically, it's one of the best things for storing global data. The class will be spawned at the beginning of the game and deleted when closing. So basically anything you want to carry as a global data throughout the entire game and all levels is go into this instance. Since other classes, like let's say actors or pawns, are deleted and spawned in between levels, they're not very useful for global variables. Let's say, you know, your character is going to carry over his health. That would be a global variable, because in between levels, it would reset to whatever the default was, unless after each level you decided to store the variable of the health in the player's core variables. But that would be a little stupid, because next time you started the game, if you started a new game, it might very well carry over, and you know, it's just better to use it as a global variable. So let's go ahead and make one. Double click. Why aren't you working? Why are you not working for me? What? Okay, hold on. Let's try this again. It's giving me issues here. Game instance. Select. I'm an idiot. I need more coffee. Hold on. Okay, that was cold. I waited. I made my coffee. I was like, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna do a tutorial. And I got caught up talking to someone. We were actually talking about a different game we're working on. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's name this. Let's just call it Shooter Game. Because this is a shooter game and this is a global variable for the whole game, right? Okay. So the other thing about a game instance is now that we have it named, it needs to be connected to the project. The project needs to know, hey, we're using this instance. So I'm just going to double check here because I think it's in here. No, okay. So you would go to settings and you want to go to your project settings. And we'll be going in and out of here quite a bit because this is where you'd also set action keys. The action keys would be under the engine in the... Oh, geez, I always forget about this. Boy, input. This is where you'd set your action keys and mappings. But where we're going to go is we're going to go into maps and modes right here under project. And you'll notice under here that it has a default game instance, which right here, game instance class. So we'd want to click the little magnifying glass. I lied. We want to click the drop down. I don't know why the magnifying glass normally... Oh, I see. It opens over here now. That's new. I've never actually seen it do that. That's weird. So you could click here, and then click this little arrow. Oh, I guess not. Drag it? I don't know. Well, we'll just click the drop down, and you used to be able to click this, and it would pop up right here. I guess they changed that, or I'm just not getting it. Anyways, so we'll just make sure we click shooter game. And there, you'll notice there's really no save. Control S will save it, and then exit out of that. So now when you start this game, shooter game will be spawned, and you'll have access to it from every other class. Alright, so another important part of this is game mode. Game mode is kind of important to know about because only the server is going to have access to this. So in single-player games, the computer you're playing on would be like the server, because it's not necessary to use like a server client function. But I mean, it's still useful to know about, right? Basically, what happens is game mode stores the level defaults. So, you know, trying to think here. It'll store data for like default pawns, default player controllers, you know, your default HUD. A good way actually is right here. If you look on the side, we have this game mode. As you can see here, they have a game mode override, and these are all the default game mode components. So, you know, you'd want to have it set like your player controller would be the player controller here and everything. So, this is a very good thing to know about. So what we're going to do is we're going to click this little create new blueprint button. And as you can see, it's creating a new game mode. And then the other way you could do that is you could just right click and go to blueprint and once again type game mode. And as you see right here, this is the game mode. And we'll name the game mode. Boy, let's just name it gameplay. Gameplay mode. That sounds about right? So we also need a game state. So the game state is kind of about tracking progress of levels. So let's say a player in a turn-based game, the game's wondering whose turn is it. The game state would tell them what turn it is, or would keep track of whose turn it is, or it would keep track of your objectives in a shooter game like we're making here. So we definitely need it. So what we're going to do is we're going to go in and we're going to select our gameplay game mode, right? And then what we're going to do is we're going to go down to game state right here, and we're just going to click the plus button, and we're going to start making things from that menu. So let's name it... I guess gameplay state. I mean, it's pretty simple, right? Let's also make sure it gets put under the right thing here. There we go. You know, I just realized we were actually in the content folder, so I made a content in a content. I'm sorry, that was weird. So here you see we have the gameplay state. So there's also something called the HUD class. So in Unreal Engine 3, this was for creating 2D UI. And in Unreal 4, we kind of have something called the UMG, which is a much stronger, more powerful design. At least from what I understand, I really wasn't a big user of the Unreal Engine 3, although I have used it recently a couple times. So this class is still kind of useful to have just to store widgets or references. So we'll just make one anyways. It's also good practice, just to make sure you got it around. So we're going to click the button next to HUD here, the plus, and we are going to name it, let's just call it Game HUD. Oh, whoops. Put that in content and name it. I had it on the upper bar. Whoops. Game HUD. And you'll notice we have a little HUD right here that pops up, and just close this for now. So we also want to connect our earlier made things. So let's see here. We want to connect our player controller. So it's the main player controller, which is what we had made earlier. We want to connect our player state class. Did we make a player state? We did not. We don't want to connect that. We don't need a spectator class. What were we missing here? Oh, default pawn. Default pawn we would want to connect to main player. And we would also want to connect our... It's really hard because I went out of order, sorry. I just started reading these to you guys. Okay, we've got main player, we've got game HUD. I'm just looking over here to make sure. So we got main player, we got game HUD. We have main player controller. We have our gameplay state, which we didn't make one. But I did cover that. No, wait, we did make one. It's right there, gameplay state. Oh, it's already connected. Duh. Because we made it through the... Wow. Alright, sorry guys. I'm having a fun time, as you could tell. So, we've got the gameplay mode, and now it's connected. And what you should do is you should play around with some of these different classes, see what they do, open them up, look at the different UI editors. Everything is going to be different for these classes. For instance, main player is going to have animation states and everything, whereas, obviously a game HUD doesn't. So just kind of go in and look at these things. So what I'm going to do, one last thing I want to do here before I wrap this up, is we're going to talk about how UE4 would handle running the game connected to these classes. Basically, when you run the game instance would be loaded. So this little shooter game right here, this game instance will load. And then the class will be spawned. So the global, remember we talked about this, the global class will be spawned. Your level that you set as default will load up. So right now it would be like this level right here. Okay, when the level is opening, it'll check the game mode, and it'll say, what do we need? What are the overrides that we need to put in? And it will spawn all of these default classes, like the main player, the game HUD, the player controller, the gameplay state, and all that. Default player controller would be asked for possessing the default pawn. So, like, if you didn't put a default pawn, but you had a pawn, it would spawn a gameplay controller, but it wouldn't know where to put it. So that's why you should always set your main player as your default pawn, and set your controller as your default controller. So if it was a driving game, but you had a character that you wanted to like get into the car, you would have to use the default controller for a character and the default character pawn, and it would get in control. And then when they got in the car, you would manually tell it, hey, they're in a car now, switch to this. However, if it was a racing game, you would start with a default controller for a car and a default pawn of a car. Then basically it would spawn all the actors that were placed in the level after it loaded the defaults. Which, this is like, I mean, you know, this is a high-level overview, so everything that I've said here is kind of more like a global sense than a per-level sense. Also, when you're opening different levels, or restarting the current one, like we already talked about, everything's going to be destroyed except for that instance class. So, you know, just keep that in mind when you're creating variables. If you want them to carry over, make sure they're in something that's a global kind of instance class that won't be destroyed on restart of level. Okay, I think that's all we've got to cover for today. Part 2 should be coming out next weekend. I'm going to hopefully get these done on Saturdays. They don't require a lot of editing, so, you know, I can't see it being too difficult to get done. And I'll try my best to get these out, because I know a couple people had come to me saying, hey, I'd really want to learn that, so what the hell, why not, right? A lot of the times, we tend to get a little busy. It's understandable. So if you guys want to keep up with us, make sure in the bottom here in the description you check it out. We have our Facebook, we have our Twitter, and we have a Patreon if you guys want to throw something on and off maybe, you know, just to help. Honestly, if you guys would feel more comfortable with like a one-time donation, you can go ahead and check out the website. That's not in the description. I tell you what, I will get it in the description as soon as I can. It might not be in this video, maybe the next. On there, we have a page where you can just kind of do like a one-time donation through PayPal or something to us, which is, you know, it's really helpful, guys. It really is. Today's tutorial was actually brought to you guys by Audible. You know, it is a great company, and you guys can get a free audiobook download and a 30-day free trial if you were to go to audibletrial.com/phm. I'm going to put that down in the description. They have over like 180,000 books you guys can choose from, or titles. You know, if you don't like it, you can cancel before it's up. You don't get charged a thing, but you know what? I think you guys should try it. Actually, before I started making this tutorial, I was just listening to Flowers for Algernon. It's my favorite book from high school, and they have it there. I work a lot, and when I'm editing these videos, you know, I don't have time to obviously be reading, so it's really nice to have a service like this where, you know, I can just listen to my favorite book. But hey, I tell you what, I'm going to catch you guys next time on I Have Coffee and You Have Ambitions. You know, just think about everything that we said today in the tutorial and be looking out for the next part. This is the Husky, and I'll see you guys later.